Jews and the state of Israel are not synonymous. There are many Jews out there who are working towards justice for the people of Palestine. So just to pick up on the introduction that was just given, I'd like to say a couple more things about Gaza before I tell you about the project that I'm actually working on. In August of last year, the United Nations put out a report, Gaza in 2020, a livable place, question mark. Now, I'd like to just read a brief excerpt from the conclusion of that report, because I believe it'll really pinpoint just how critical of a situation that exists in Gaza at the moment. So here it is. There will be virtually no reliable access to sources of safe drinking water. Standards of healthcare and education will have continued to decline, and the vision of affordable and reliable electricity for all will have become a distant memory for most. The already high number of poor, marginalized, and food insecure people depending upon assistance will not have changed, and in all likelihood will have increased. To ensure that Gaza in 2020 will be a livable place, that's a mere 7 years from now, as we all know, ongoing Herculean efforts by Palestinians and partners in such sectors as energy, education, health, water, and sanitation need to be accelerated and intensified in the face of all difficulties. What I'd like to add to that is that, as I'm sure many of you know, Gaza is blockaded by Israel. There is no freedom of movement of people, of goods, in and out of Gaza. As long as that blockade remains in effect, the situation that is described in that UN report, it'll be virtually impossible to address it. So, I'll tell you now a little bit about the project that I'm working on. Gaza's Arc is a part of the International Freedom Flotilla. Now, that's a coalition of a number of groups around the world, primarily in Europe and also in North America, Australia. The Freedom Flotilla, since I believe it was 2008, has attempted to send boats to Gaza to challenge the blockade. In the very early days, some boats got through, but in more recent years, they are inevitably stopped by the Israeli Navy. And many of you probably heard about what happened in May 2010, where the Turkish ship, the Mavi Marmara, was boarded by Israeli commandos and 9 people were killed. So what's the difference between what people have been trying to do and what Gaza's Arc is about? Whereas the previous flotillas have attempted to enter Gaza, Gaza's Arc, which is an initiative that is a joint thing between people on this continent, in the US and Canada and Australia, as well as Palestinians in Gaza itself. In this case, we are actually very close to buying a boat which will be refurbished, made seaworthy, and will be sailed out of Gaza. Now, why is this significant? Well, the primary justification that the State of Israel uses for the blockade is that they do not want any weapons to enter Gaza. And that's the reason why the lack of freedom of movement. In this case, the boat will leave Gaza. It'd be very hard to justify weapons entering Gaza on a boat that's actually leaving it. So, what I'd like to stress here is that this is a citizen-to-citizen initiative. Much of the solidarity work that is done in the name of Palestine is done because governments refuse to act. Israel, on many cases, has been found guilty of war crimes. crimes against humanity, and yet the governments of the world, very much including the government in this country, refuses to even be critical. So the goal is to challenge the blockade and also to help stimulate the economy of Gaza. But more importantly, it's a symbolic act. The boat that will be leaving will be a relatively small one. It will carry a number of different goods, goods that prior to about 2008 were freely traded with the rest of the world. I was in Gaza this past summer for a month, and the only reason that the Gaza economy is functioning even as well as it is because of the legal tunnels connecting Gaza to Egypt. The economy without those tunnels, well, 80% of people in Gaza are currently food insecure. They're in need of food aid. Most of that comes from UN agencies, but other sources as well. Fairly recently, the Egyptian government has taken it upon itself to shut down at least some of these tunnels. And as that has happened, people are facing even more severe economic times, and the result is that food is even more difficult to acquire. So once we
Okay, well, I'll just try and talk loud here. Let me just find where I was again. So what's really important here in doing a project like this is that media attention is the key. So
So each step along the way, buying the boat, which will happen in coming weeks,
to stocking it, to renovating it, to making it seaworthy. We'll be reaching out to international media, to human rights organizations, to trade unions, and also to other key civil society stakeholders to publicize it. What is really important here is that people of the world be made aware.
Okay, yeah, that sounds like it's working. Okay, let me just get my train of thought back here. So our work is really about informing people. You know, back in November, there was, and I know it made the media here somewhat more than it typically does, there was a conflict with the Israeli forces attacking Gaza. What we heard about in the media was that this was precipitated by rockets being fired from Gaza into Israel. What we didn't hear about was that just before that recent spate, and it is true that those rockets were fired, was that Israel assassinated a key leader within the Gaza government, the Hamas government, that had been negotiating an ongoing truce with Israel. So, two things here. One has to ask, why would Israel assassinate someone who they have been negotiating a truce with? And two, why did we not hear about it? When you look at this situation, as I believe when you look at any other human rights situation around the planet, I think it's fundamental to go to media sources that are not mainstream. Mainstream media will tend to give you a very one-sided point of view, and there are many, many sources to find out the other side of the picture, at least when it comes to the situation between Palestine and Israel. So, back to Gaza. We have a website up. There are brochures out there which will give you a lot of information. One of the things that we are doing, of course, is raising money to pay for this boat and to pay for the goods that will be on the boat. And we've also been soliciting endorsements from people such as yourselves, from people around the world. And just to give you a very brief idea of the type of people who have been endorsing it, I'm just going to read you a very brief list of names that you will almost certainly know. Archbishop Desmond Tutu, instrumental in bringing the end of apartheid in South Africa, a Nobel Peace Prize winner. Hetty Epstein, perhaps not exactly a household name, but a Holocaust survivor, a Jew. Dennis Holliday, a former UN Assistant Secretary General. Maureen McGuire, also a Nobel Peace Prize winner for her work in her homeland in Ireland. And Alice Walker, an author and Pulitzer Prize winner. So I will leave it there. Just want to thank you very much once again, and I'll be around if anybody wants to ask any questions later on.